Hey, let's talk about some history.
Okay. All right. Let's get on to history. Now, last time I think I name dropped this in there, but you asked about greatest Olympian of all time. Greatest Olympian of all time, probably. Well, I would have to say definitely the greatest athlete of the 20th century is a guy called Jim Thorpe. Now, do you know anything about Jim Thorpe?
I do not.
Okay.
I do
Wow.
recognize the name though. I have heard the
Okay.
name.
Okay. All right. Jim Thorpe, it's pretty wild because of the times when he lived. He's right on the edge of myth and history, right? The truth is that before the 1920s, there was really no such thing as the sports page in a newspaper, right? The 20s was a real gateway time for this, right? Prior to this, you know, stuff about baseball, stuff about horse racing and boxing, which were the big three sports in America back in the day, would appear, in the entertainment pages, maybe in the news if it's the World Series or whatever. But there was no such thing as a sports section. So a lot of Thorpe's early exploits are just being reported through these very secondhand ways, or it's a news story coming off the wire, or people are just making stuff up, right? Which happened a lot. Now, it's shocking to me how many people, on one hand, that how many people don't know about Thorpe. I remember when I was a kid. Okay, to the boomer generation, this guy was a legend, right? Because he was already out of sports and they had heard about it from their mothers and fathers, right? And their uncles and aunts and whatever, right? About the legend of Jim Thorpe. I actually remember reading about him in a kid's book, some kind of kid's book on sports, right? Great athletes. But really, the man deserves more respect. Now, there are reasons why we have forgotten him, and I will get to it uh, at the end of the this presentation. But I'm going to try and do this as briefly as possible because the man's life just runs through sports and sports history. So I'll keep it as short as possible. All right. Jim Thorpe was born in 1887 in Sioux Territory of the U.S. It was not part of the U.S. at this point. His name in his original language translates as bright path. Bright path. This is
Oh,
his actual name. Okay. So we don't know too much about his early days. By the age of 11, we know that he was in one of these so-called Indian schools in Canada. I understand that you know all about this issue, um, taking kids away and putting them far away into a boarding school. At age 18, however, he was sent to Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania. Now, here's where the legend begins. All right. Okay. So the first legend has it that he arrived on the campus in Pennsylvania, taking a train, I believe, and he gets off the train, gets to the campus, and he's walking around the campus with some of the other students, and he goes, "What's that?" And he points, and there's this bar standing up, right, in the field, in the sports field, right? And they say, "Oh yeah, that's the school record for the long jump." The legend has it that Thorpe broke this record then and there, wearing his street clothes. Right? Like that's
wow.
the okay. Now, don't know if the story is true. We do know that he ultimately did officially set the school record for the high jump. And this was back in the day before they did the flip over the bar and landed on their back, right? You just had to jump over it like old Superman, right? Like a
Hmm.
superhero. You just had to jump it. Okay. That's where he begins. Now, at Carlisle Indian School, the he was on the teams for track and field, baseball, lacrosse, and football. Now, the football coach, the track and field coach, baseball coach, the athletic director of the school was a guy known as Pop Warner. Pop Warner. Do you know Pop Warner?
No, can't say I
Okay.
do.
Pop Warner is an early pioneer of American football, and now
Oh,
there is a strata, there is an age group of football, organized football in America called Pop Warner football. Now,
oh.
if you ever have to ask the effect of someone's influence on the game, well, if you have a league named after you, yeah, that says something. Like, for example, in America, we also have Babe Ruth baseball, which I
Oh,
believe is
okay.
for 14 to 16-year-olds. So Pop Warner, major, major, major influence in sport, especially football in America. Now, this is in the 19 teens. Okay, now Warner turned Carlisle into a football powerhouse in the teens behind Jim Thorpe. From 1910 to 1920, this is literally one of the top colleges in football. In 1911, Carlisle beat the mighty Harvard 18 to 15 based on 4 field goals from Thorpe. Right. So he did most of the scoring in that game, kind of reminiscent of this last Super Bowl. Now, this game is still considered the one of the all-time upsets in college football. I got a quote here. The Houston Post described the game and described Thorpe as an Oklahoman Indian. Thorpe, playing half for Carlisle, is recognized as the greatest player of the year and a man whose kicking is likely to revolutionize the game. Okay, now he's primarily a halfback, and yet he's kicking the ball. Following year, 1912, Thorpe scores 27 touchdowns and scores 224 points for Carlisle. That's in 12 games. Okay.
Wow.
He's putting up some stats. Okay. But even before that 1912 season was the Olympics in Stockholm. And here's where Thorpe becomes an international legend. Okay. In that year, of course, he won the pentathlon and the decathlon. Okay. If that's not impressive enough, okay, you know how they do it for the decathlon in the Olympics, right? It's this bizarre, really complicated point system, right? If you had taken Jim Thorpe's point total from 1912, he would have placed on the podium in every Olympics up until 1980. Okay? That's how dominant he was in the decathlon. In the pentathlon, which was remade in this year, 1912, it used to be this crazy mix of like shooting and horse racing and stuff like this. But in 1912, they changed it back to the classic Greek pentathlon, which was the broad jump, the javelin throw, 200 meters, discus throw, and the 1,500 meters, right? Now, in this competition, Thorpe won 4 of the 5 events and finished 3rd in the javelin.
Damn.
Again, that's dominant, all right? Oh, by the way, as an asterisk to 1912, he also won, get this now, he won the intercollegiate ballroom dancing tournament. Now, the legend here is that he learned how to dance something like 30 minutes before the first competition. And he ended up winning the US that was at the beginning of the year, goes to the Olympics in the middle of the year, scores 224 points in 12 games in the autumn. Right? That's his 1912. Possibly definitely the greatest single year in sports history by an athlete. Unfortunately, and here's where the story takes a negative turn, another negative turn. In January of 1913, some newspaperman broke the story that Thorpe had played professional baseball in 1909 and 1910, in the summertime using an assumed name.
Oh.
And ultimately what happened is that, yes, the IOC stripped him of his medals. Okay. Said, oh, you're not an amateur athlete, you lose. Now, to their credit, as I understand it, the story goes that both the silver and the bronze medal winners deferred on this. They said, nope, those belong to Jim Thorpe, right? I don't want this medal, right? It's not mine to win. Because they respected him so damn much because he crushed them. He crushed them in this Olympics, right? And so to this day, as far as I know, to this day, the family has still not gotten these medals. The International Olympic Committee still does not acknowledge Thorpe as the actual winner of these things.
Oh.
Now, it really gets bad here because Pop Warner was the guy who recommended this, right? He recommended that, oh, you got nothing to do this summer? Why don't you go play ball and stay in shape? But he did this for all his native athletes, right? That's what he did because they didn't have any school in the summer. So he's like, well, and of course, nobody really trusts the native people, right? So stay out of trouble, go play ball in North Carolina, right? And so he did this all the time, right? And so, but to avoid, taking responsibility, Pop had Thorpe sign a confession letter, basically, that exonerated Pop of all blame. I'm ignorant, this kind of thing. I'm ignorant. I didn't know what I was doing, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Whatever. You would think that the public would immediately turn on Thorpe. Nowadays, they would, right? But no, actually, the public and most of the sports media was outraged by the stripping of the medals. I mean, again, he was an international freaking hero, right? Okay. So now, there's no such thing as professional football yet. He can't play amateur anymore because he's already confessed to being a professional ball player. So what does he do? Well, he joins the major leagues, right? Because, hey, what the hell? It's my third best sport, but I got nothing to do, right? So now, of course, most major league teams wanted to sign this guy, right? Because of the Olympics. Okay. Ultimately, he ends up on the New York Giants. And the New York Giants were managed by a guy named John McGraw, who was known as really the first great manager in baseball. Most of the owners of the league saw Jim Thorpe as this cash cow, but McGraw, he wasn't having it. Now, whether you want to call it racism or not, it's the prevailing mentality of the time. McGraw was just convinced that Thorpe was an inferior baseball player, based on the fact that natives can't play baseball, right? But, he stayed on the team. He mostly rode the bench, but he was a part of the 1913 National League champions. He was on the team for the 1917 World Series, played a little bit. But what's interesting is in those teen years, 13 to 17, the Major League Baseball was trying to expand the game, right? And so in the off season, they would do these tours in Europe, right? And also one year they went to Egypt, just pretty wild. They were playing baseball right near the pyramids. They laid out a baseball field right near the pyramids and played a game there. It's pretty wild. But in 1917, for example, when they were touring, the teams they chose were the White Sox, right, who would eventually go on to become the great 1919 White Sox, who threw the series. But the other team was the Giants because of Thorpe. And when they played in London that year, 20,000 people came to the baseball game in London. Okay. Why? To see Jim Thorpe. Basically, they still remembered him from the 12 Olympics. In his last year of Major League Baseball, he played with the Boston Braves in 1919 and hit 327 in the first 60 games of the year before he quit. And guess what? Went into football. Right? So at that time, this was just before the NFL was formed. The Canton Bulldogs, who he played for, were named by the Associated Press the top professional team of the year in 1916, 1917, and 1919. So they're basically the de facto professional champions. And at the same time, Thorpe was doing the Bo Jackson. He was playing pro baseball and semi-pro football with the Canton Bulldogs. Okay, so in 1920, which is well known as a watershed year for sports, maybe sometime I'll do a piece on 1920 because it's such a key year. But in terms of football, that's the year the APFA was formed, the American Pro Football Association, the following year becoming the NFL, the National Football League. This league, when they came together, knew they had to bring on the Canton Bulldogs, right? They knew they had to get Thorpe into the league, right? This is the best team in the U.S., right? So they did. How did they do this? They made Thorpe the president of the league. Okay, now, surely Thorpe stands as the only guy ever to be commissioner / halfback in football. That's a pretty wild double duty right there. Never mind manager coach. How about how about player commissioner? How about that? Basically, Thorpe only lasted 6 years in the NFL. I mean, he's already in his 30s at this point, right? He lasted 6 years in the NFL, played with Canton, played with a team called the Oorong Indians, who were very bad, played with the Rock Island Independents, who were pretty bad. He eventually returned to Canton at age 39 and was listed on the roster for a game in 1928 when he was 41. LeBron who? But he didn't actually play in that game. That was just a promotional thing for the Chicago Cardinals. But he's not done yet with sports. One more sport to go. In 1927, before there was a professional league, Jim Thorpe got together a band of his tribe mates, called them the world famous Indians, and went around the country playing that crazy new game called basketball. Right? Now, Thorpe only played barnstorming basketball for 1 year. Of course, the stats on this are pretty shaky. Right? It's not a real league player or anything, so we don't know how much he actually played, but he was the player coach for the world famous Indians. And they played they ultimately played 57 games in 1927, went 49-8, and at one point whipped off a 16-game winning streak. So that gets us to 1929. And unfortunately, like for many, many, many people, 1929, this was the beginning of the end for Thorpe. I mean, Great Depression. For a little while, when Roosevelt came in, he was able to get some work as a sports coach through the New Deal. But other than that, this was back in the day when you retired as an athlete, that was it. You were of no use to society. You might as well become a bus driver at that point, right? And so similar thing. I mean, Thorpe got a little bit of work playing extras or doing bit parts in Hollywood movies. But, unfortunately, his main occupation became alcoholism. And he had to live off of what money he did make playing in the games. In 1950, he came back into the public view as he was named the Athlete of the Half Century by the Associated Press. And the next year got a movie about his life made starring Burt Lancaster, which is some weird typecasting, but but that's how it was in the 50s in Hollywood, right? White guys played everybody. And Thorpe passed away in 1952. Again, liver issues due to alcoholism. His wife was broke enough at this point that to pay for the funeral, what she did is she donated his body to a town in Pennsylvania if they changed the name of the town to Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania is now the name of the town. It's true. Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania is the name of the town. This was a town that he had never been to in his life, but they paid for his funeral cost and to bury him. And so if you want to see the Jim Thorpe Memorial, it is in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Story's not over yet, though. Such a legend continues on. In 1961, Dwight Eisenhower made a speech about Thorpe. I think it was some Sports Hall of Fame commemoration where he recalled the story. He called Thorpe the he could do anything better than any football player I ever saw. Of course, Dwight Eisenhower was a great athlete at Army. Right, of course, at the West Point football school. And Army was a power back in those teens, right? Well, there was one game where Eisenhower and his buddy, nowadays we would call them the edge rushers on defense, they decided that they were going to take out Thorpe early into this game. Well, ultimately what happened is first guy went out, I believe, with a broken collarbone. Eisenhower went out with a broken leg. After missing a tackle. I mean, Thorpe didn't even have to contact him. He missed a tackle on Thorpe so wildly that he landed bad and broke his leg. So basically, here's Thorpe changing history just by being such a badass. If Eisenhower had finished out the season, he might never have become president. He might never have become a general. Right? Oh, and by the way, our Army lost in that game 27-6, by the way. Okay. So here we come. And I remember this distinctly. 1999, year 2000, of course, everybody is lining up to do athletes of the century, whatever, And I thought for sure that this was a joke, right? It's got to be Thorpe, right? It has to be, right? I've been hearing about him all my life, or I've been reading about him. There's nobody that compares with this guy. Well, rude awakening time. The Associated Press named him number 3 of the century. Behind, okay, now get this, behind Babe Ruth and Michael Jordan. Okay. Wow. Okay. Dominant for sure, but single sport athletes, right?
Michael Jordan played too.
Yes, badly. Oh, also golf, if you want to include that. And he played that badly enough. He lost at least $1 million at golf. So not really a multi-sport athlete. ESPN had Thorpe 7th.
Wow.
Behind, who is he behind? Jordan, Ruth, of course, Jim Brown, Wayne Gretzky, Muhammad Ali. Okay. Again, I feel kind of ripped off. Sports Illustrated, Muhammad Ali was number 1. Thorpe was also 7th. They listed all the same guys that ESPN did. Wow. Brown, Gretzky, Ruth, Jordan. ABC actually listed Thorpe as number 1. But in 2016, they released a list that said that was called the top 10 greatest U.S. Summer Olympic gold medalists of all time. And he didn't even make the top 10. How does that happen? That in 17 years, you go from top athlete ever to not on the list? Now, I don't know. Maybe somebody told ABC that Thorpe was not official. But come on now. ABC, you're dropping the ball here. So I feel like Jim is a little bit disrespected here. However, I did want to leave on a bit of a high note here. Okay, so out there in South Dakota, there's a high school called Pine Ridge High School. This is on the Sioux Reservation. Now this is a very hot point in American history. Couple of points. In 1899, there was a huge 1890. I'm sorry. There was a huge skirmish there. 300 Sioux people were killed by the U.S. cavalry. In 1972, there was a play by the American Indian movement where they actually took over the town and the highway leading in and out of town for 71 days. They were in a standoff with federal agents. That was in 1972, right? Most people don't even know about this story anymore, but at the time, it was a huge story. So here's Pine Ridge High School. Pine Ridge High School is the high school right in the middle of this area of great historical import. The population, of course, is like 95% Native American. They have teams in football, wrestling, girls volleyball, boys and girls basketball, cross country running, and soccer. Okay. 1987, the basketball team, the boys basketball team, made history by going 26-0. It was the first team in South Dakota to go undefeated. They won the Class A championship that year. So it's like a third division championship. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because the name of the team is the Pine Ridge Thorpes. The Pine Ridge Thorpes.
Wow.
So thankfully, some people, his people, still remember the legend of Jim Thorpe, greatest athlete of all professional times, of the last 500 years, I can say, without reservation. Gotta be. Screw ESPN, screw AP, Thorpe. Greatest athlete of all time.
And I'm showing a little bit of this website. I just searched Jim Thorpe, and this website came up. It seems this guy has done a lot on Jim Thorpe. Looks like he wrote a book. There's some videos on here about Jim Thorpe. So if anybody wants to learn more, certainly search him up.
Also,
check it out.
Also, I can recommend a podcast that I did a few years ago.
There we go.
The name of the podcast is Truly the Goats. Truly the Goats. You can get this on any podcast feed. Episode 1 is Jim Thorpe. The premise of the episode is, okay, I want to talk about really the greatest of all time. So if you like history, it's a good series for you. Episode 1 is all about Jim Thorpe, discussing a lot of the things I just talked about today. I also have episodes on sumo wrestling in the 1600s. I've got stuff on the Roman gladiators, as well as stuff on Michael Jordan and Babe Didrikson, who is probably the greatest female athlete of all time that you never heard of. Probably talk about that on this show too. But Truly the Goats, check it out wherever you get your podcast or on sportshistorynetwork.com.
Wow, there you go.
So I recommend that, of course, because it's hosted by this guy, Oz Davis.
Quite a handsome devil, I hear.
Really? Okay. Well, I don't know if I'd go that far. I heard he's brilliant. Brilliant mind. Exactly. Beautiful mind. Yeah. So Jim Thorpe, check it out. Please check him out. I want to say this too. I really honestly think that the reason why he doesn't make number one on ESPN, that he doesn't make number one on these visual mediums is simply because there's no film on it. There's no film. That's the advantage you have with putting Michael Jordan and Muhammad Ali at number one. You got lots of video, right? It's tough to make a program. I mean, okay, Ken Burns did it in the Civil War. Ken Burns did it in baseball, where you just have photographs and voiceovers and stuff. But sports documentaries don't like to do that so much. So I honestly think that the main reason is just because he was born before a time without video. and a few photos. There are very few photos of Thorpe, despite his worldwide fame. So, I mean, the truth is that he was awesome. I mean, he was just the best athlete ever. I mean, there's no comparison. Michael Phelps, get out of here. Get out of
here. Definitely sounds like he was definitely the best.
Yeah. I mean,
you have convinced me.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus, the only thing he didn't master was hockey, right? He was probably a pretty good soccer player too.
Probably tried boxing. Probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe there was some boxing in there too.
Oh, man.
But yeah, really, just, I mean, one of these athletes where okay, Bo Jackson, who was really the modern equivalent, really the only comparison. Bo Jackson used to say that one of the reasons why he did track and field in college is because he hated practice so much. He didn't want to practice with the football team. And so the coach, since he was on the track and field team, they're like, oh, yeah, you got to meet today. Okay, no practice for you. I mean, literally, he's a guy that had that luxury that said, oh, yeah, I'm just going to, just like we just heard from Thorpe, right? Thorpe's like, well, I can't play amateur. There's no pro football. So I guess I'll play baseball because I can, Jordan tried to do that, right? I'm going to play baseball just because I can. Well,
Deion Sanders did it too.
Well, yeah, Deion I would also put up there because he was also probably the greatest cornerback of all time, besides maybe Ronnie Lott. But Sanders was, again, this is the level. And Thorpe is beyond this level for his time. Deion is close to that Bo level in my estimation. But Thorpe is where it's at. Just an incredible, incredible story. Just really fantastic athlete, fantastic guy. Jim Thorpe, ladies and gentlemen.